A typically silly and very funny moment from Life of Brian, a religious satire starring the Monty Python comedy troupe. Life of Brian, which I enjoyed very much, is just one of 5 new movies we'll be reviewing on Sneak Previews, 2 film critics talking about the latest movies in town. Across the aisle from me, Roger Ebert, film critic of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And this is Gene Siskel, film critic for the Chicago Tribune. Now, besides Life of Brian, which I also liked, we'll also look at Time After Time, a time travel comedy that dumps H.G. Wells in modern-day San Francisco. The Onion Field, which is based on a true story about the kidnapping and murder of a Los Angeles policeman. Peppermint Soda, a charming French comedy about young girls coming of age. And now Gene starts with Charles Bronson's latest would-be thriller, Love and Bullets.
Yeah, you saw it too, huh? Would-be. One of the biggest cases of wasted talent in the movies is Charles Bronson, who's been turning in one lackluster performance after another in his last few action pictures, and that's certainly true of Love and Bullets, in which Bronson plays a Phoenix detective sent to Europe to bring back a mobster's gun mall so she can testify against her crooked boyfriend. Bronson and the woman, played by Jill Ireland, who's Bronson's real-life wife, are chased by gunmen as they travel on a train carrying passenger cars. The old exploding car scene. How original. Not very. I think the reason why we get so many exploding car scenes is that we really hate cars, and this is some sort of fantasy for us to get back at them. And what was Jill Ireland doing in that picture? Some kind of imitation of Dolly Parton, huh? At any rate, Bronson simply walks through this film while stuntmen perform around him. The most interesting thing about the picture is Rod Steiger as the crime boss. What's interesting about him? He stutters. Yeah, it's that dull a film.
It certainly is. I mean, this was a real snoozer as far as I was concerned. You know, both Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson have specialized in kind of strong, silent-type characters in a lot of their recent movies. And Eastwood, in a movie like Escape from Alcatraz, really made it work. But here, Bronson, who probably has altogether, if you added it up in this film, probably about 3 pages of dialogue, doesn't seem to care. He's a very flat character. He seems to sleepwalk through the role. It's really an ordeal to watch.
The thing is that because he's so dull, I don't think he gets any fun out of performing this way. Eastwood seems to enjoy being the tough guy. Bronson is sour, dour. We don't care whether he pulls off his mission here or not.
You know, there seems to be some kind of a rule. Every 4th Charles Bronson picture is going to be worth looking at, and the other 3 are what? Tax shelter deals? Who knows?
Also, he casts his wife again as the leading lady, and I think he could do better, find a better actress to play opposite against.
Well, let's look at something that's a lot more fun. It's a charming new comedy called Time After Time, which begins with the indisputable fact that the great British author H.G. Wells wrote a great deal about time travel into the future, and some of his predictions were remarkably accurate. Was he just a good guesser, or did he have an unfair advantage because he actually traveled into the future? Well, in Time After Time, Wells has developed a time machine which is hijacked by Jack the Ripper, who uses it to escape from Victorian London to modern-day San Francisco. And Wells follows him in hot pursuit, and in 1979, far in his own future, he winds up having dinner with a liberated young lady. Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen, you might remember her from the Jack Nicholson picture, Going South. They both have a really nice quality there. The whole movie, in fact, has a delicate way of quietly kidding serious material. But there are more dramatic moments, too, like in this scene, where Wells demonstrates his time machine to his doubting girlfriend. Sometimes it's not so hot getting your picture on the front page. Time After Time could have been one of those clumsy satires that make a lot of simple points, time after time, but it's not. It's light-footed and quick-thinking. It treats its material just seriously enough to make us care, and then it kids its characters just enough to seem playful. And in the midst of all the science fiction apparatus and Jack the Ripper's attack on the women of San Francisco, the awkward love affair between Malcolm McDowell and Mary Steenburgen is just plain sweet and charming.
I agree with you up and down the line. This film was by Nicholas Meyer, who did the equally witty 7% Solution. This picture is sort of an old-fashioned Hollywood fanciful entertainment. It reminds me in a way of Warren Beatty's remake, Heaven Can Wait.
Right.
That took us to heaven. This picture takes us into the future, which is really the present. It's nice, and it has nice special effects, time travel, twinkling little lights. old-time, classy Hollywood filmmaking.
And you know, there's something else in the midst of a fantasy or a science fiction film, which I guess we can call it, and that is the relationship between Mary Steenburgen and Malcolm McDowell. We use a lot of times we talk about the chemistry that goes on in a film. A lot of the times we don't know what we mean, but this time I think there really is a chemistry, a kind of an awkwardness, a sweetness, an affection there that comes through and really sells that relationship.
Yeah, you want them to get together, but know that since they come from two different times, that they really can't in some way.
Well, don't give away the ending.
No, it's a strong picture. It really is. Now, how about this? Two good comedies in one of our shows. Our next film is a comedy that's causing quite a bit of controversy. It's Life of Brian by the Monty Python comedy troupe, seen here regularly on public television. The Monty Python gang always makes fun of social customs, and Life of Brian makes fun of biblical movies. You know, the pictures that purport to tell the story of important religious figures, but always with a Hollywood cast of thousands. Life of Brian is the story of a guy named Brian Cohn. Mistaken at first for the Christ child, he grows up to be an oddball, but how could he help that? After all, he has a mother who likes to take him to public stonings. They're in the crowd wearing fake beards. Only men can attend. That was Monty Python member John Cleese conducting the stoning and getting stoned himself. Later, Brian Cohn, our reluctant hero, is thrust into the limelight. He joins an anti-Roman protest group and is arrested by Pontius Pilate, but this is no ordinary Pontius Pilate. In Life of Brian, this one can't pronounce his R's. Funny stuff. Now, this film is controversial because Life of Brian does relate to the Christ story and does have some religious leaders now saying that it's therefore blasphemous. They obviously shouldn't see Life of Brian. In fact, I wonder if they did see Life of Brian. This movie isn't about Jesus. It's a parody of religious movies. And it's also one of the year's funniest films.
I think that's the key. Either you find it funny or you don't. I've read the newspaper reports about the religious leaders and groups who have said the film is offensive and blasphemous. I must say that I went looking for that in a way, and I just didn't find it. If anybody who sees Monty Python's Flying Circus on television is not going to find too much in this movie to upset or surprise them. It's a funny, silly, harmless movie.
I feel bad having to defend it. You know, I wonder about these religious leaders who say things like this. Do they think that people who have deep personal religious faith will have that faith shaken by a 90-minute movie? How shallow, how patronizing, how insulting to people of faith. This is a funny picture.
I think you're right, and I think now we should go on to something completely different. Joseph Wambaugh is a former Los Angeles policeman who's written several bestsellers about cops, but his most serious and personal book isn't a novel, but a factual story about a real crime. It's called The Onion Field. It's about the kidnapping of two Los Angeles cops in 1963 and the murder of one of them, and it's one of this year's most harrowing, most compelling, most frightening films. The case of The Onion Field begins when two plainclothes vice cops stop a couple of suspicious characters. Good acting there by a talented cast. The guy with the gun in the cop's back at the beginning of the scene is especially good, and his name is James Woods. I'm predicting he'll get an Oscar nomination for this picture. Here he is trying to sell his version of what happened on that tragic night. James Woods, you might have recognized his face. He's done a lot of movies and television, but this is by far his best role. And the movie's an intimate portrait of two third-rate hoods, but more importantly, it's also Joe Wambaugh's indictment of the American system of criminal justice, because that case eventually became the longest-running criminal case in the history of California. And the movie traces all the continuances and frustrations as they went back and forth from one courtroom to another. I'd say, Gene, The Onion Field is one of the year's best films.
Lots of agreement on this show. I'm with you, one of the year's best films, for two reasons. Its portrait of criminals is very creepy. These are not glamorous gangsters. No Bogart Cagney here. These are rough, mean, horrible guys. That's good. Second, you know Dirty Harry, which was, I think, one of the best police films of the last 10 years. It was about the cops' frustration with criminals and the criminal justice system. Well, this film takes that sort of fanciful attitude and makes it real and tough. We see the horrible things that happen after the crime. That's just the beginning of a crime.
Right, the legal system itself is a crime in this film.
This one, 7 years this case took.
I think one of the reasons for that might be that Wambaugh made the movie himself. He's written a lot of books, as we know. Two of his books were made into movies earlier, The New Centurions and The Choir Boys. He hated both films. And he made a public statement, no more of my books are going to be made into movies unless I do the movie myself and I do it the way I think it should be done. As a cop, he didn't want an artificial climax, the murder of a cop. He wanted to show the consequences of a death, of a murder, the law, stretching through the law courts for years on end. And I think he succeeded. I think he made good on his promise.
It's a strong film. As you said, one of the year's best. Now, there's a long legacy of French films treating the way adults misunderstand and abuse children. A number of French filmmakers have told the story of their own tortured childhoods. Now comes Peppermint Soda by a woman, Diane Curies, who recall some of her own painful moments of her adolescence through the story of two sisters growing up one summer in France. For example, there's the day the younger sister wants to wear stockings, but her mother won't let her. It's one of those scenes that rings true in any country. Makes you wonder which is worse, letting her wear the stockings or humiliating her by not allowing her to wear the stockings. Peppermint Soda is not a simple-minded, good kids, lousy parents movie. During the film, we realize that little girl's mother has her own set of problems. She, too, once was an adolescent. Peppermint Soda is full of scenes like that one on the bus, small scenes with large truths. I like the picture a lot.
You know, Gene, there must be something the matter here, because I like the picture, too, so that means we agree on 5 pictures in a row on this program. If I remember correctly, the last show we disagreed on 4 out of 5.
What I like about more than the agreement is that we're finally getting some pictures that are good. We're out of the lousy summer movies. We're now into the fall with some substantial pictures.
And Peppermint Soda is certainly one of them. You mentioned that French filmmakers like to make films about the problems of adolescence, the moment of coming of age. The picture that Peppermint Soda really reminded me of is one of the most famous movies ever made, The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut, which is about a 13-year-old boy coming of age, dealing with school, dealing with his parents. This picture, in a way, is a female version of the same story, showing that girls go through the same problems that boys do. And at the end of The 400 Blows, you have one of the most famous single shots in the history of the movies. The little kid on the beach turns toward the camera. There's a freeze frame, and he's caught forever right at that moment between childhood and adolescence. And at the end of Peppermint Soda, the director has the very same shot of a young girl, just to kind of remind us, if you will, of a moment in cinematic history.
And now here's a little critter to remind us of some of the worst moments in cinematic history. Spot the Wonder Dog. Time for Dog of the Week, where we each pick the week's worst movies.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Spot. My dog this week has a wonderful title, Nocturna. That's the name of Dracula's granddaughter. And now, how, you might ask, I can already hear you asking this, does a vampire who is dead by definition reproduce himself so he has children and grandchildren? Well, don't ask. Nocturna has abandoned Transylvania for the equally forbidding streets of Manhattan, and like the good vampire she is, she sleeps all day and spends all of her nights in discos. Well, how do modern-day vampires obtain fresh human blood? By running crooked massage parlors, of course, and fighting it out with all the other lusting creatures in singles bars. The movie is completely disorganized. There are long disco passages that have nothing at all to do with vampires or anything else. And there's a subplot involving, of all people, none other than John Carradine and Yvonne DiCarlo. They both look like they'd like to sprout wings and fly away. As a matter of fact, they do.
Saturday Night Blood Bank, right? My dog this week is the latest Peter Fonda movie, Wanda, Nevada. Now, Peter Fonda has made a lot of dogs ever since setting the movie industry on its ear a decade ago with Easy Rider. In Wanda, Nevada, Peter Fonda plays a Western gambler in the 50s who wins Brooke Shields in a poker game. Poor guy, doesn't he know that Brooke Shields, who is very pretty, still doesn't know how to act? He should have seen her ruin George Burns' performance in Just You and Me, Kid. Wanda, Nevada is one of those us-against-the-world pictures as Fonda and Shields travel across the Southwest trying to stay one step ahead of the law. The problem with this picture is real simple. Neither Fonda nor Shields is appealing as an individual, and together, as a couple, they only double our displeasure.
Nor do they double our fun.
Yeah.
So much for the dogs. Now let's take another look at the main movies on this show. Both Gene and I really admire the R-rated The Onion Field, the Los Angeles crime drama based on the book by Joseph Wambaugh, and that's why there's a yes next to both of our names. We both think it's one of the year's best movies. We can also recommend Time After Time, the charming new comedy in which H.G. Wells finds himself adrift in modern-day San Francisco. 2 more yeses for that one. But neither one of us can even remotely recommend Love and Bullets, the confused and pointless so-called thriller starring Charles Bronson. But we do agree again on Peppermint Soda, the light and delicate little French comedy about the dreams and disappointments of adolescent girls. And we agree also on The Life of Brian. We both liked its brash, satirical tone, and so we recommend that you see it.
So much for the films on this show. Next on Sneak Previews, we'll be reviewing 10, a comedy of one man's search for the perfect woman. Also, Burt Reynolds in the domestic drama Starting Over. And the most widely publicized film of the year, Francis Coppola's Vietnam War film, Apocalypse Now. Until then, see you at the movies.